in the forefront is primarily showing her, again, like I was saying at the beginning, showing her that affection that she can expect, in even greater amounts from Krishna. Like, how can I be the presence of God's love in her life right now so that she feels enough freedom to explore that on her own?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Free Radical Podcast. And today I had the opportunity to speak with a very dear friend, Ananda-murari Prabhu. Ananda-murari studied music performance in Northern Arizona University and psychology at the University of Colorado in Denver. In his early 20s, he immersed himself into yoga monasteries, living as a monk, to practice and teach meditation both in North America and throughout India. After serving on the board of multiple communities as engagement director, Ananda started working in the private coaching and financial sectors. Alongside his professional life, Ananda is also touring and recording musical artist. He and his wife live in an intentional community in southern Michigan, where he also enjoys taking care of cows and vegetables. And I must add to that, now he's taking care of his brand new baby. So for those who would like to contact him, here I'm sharing the email, which is spiritualsoundyoga@gmail.com. So we've had a very exciting conversation with Ananda-murari. We've talking about very rich, profound topics about the importance of transitions in life and to highlight these sacred moments to guarantee a proper moving into different stages in our existence. We talk about fatherhood. We talk about male spirituality. We talk about music and artistry as another form of being a father and creating. So please join us in the conversation. This is the Free Radical Podcast. And to support it, please subscribe to our channel by clicking on the bell. And if you feel nourished by the conversation, like it, share it, and drop your thoughts in the comments section, of course, to keep our conversation going. So now, dear friends, brothers and sisters, here is Ananda-murari. So Ananda-murari, welcome. Thanks so much to be with you. And I generally like to think how first we get to know each other first, how we get to know in contact, according to my memory. At least you correct me, and let's see which memory is less inaccurate.
Okay.
At least how I came to know about you, and probably you came to know about me from other place, but I came to know about you, I think, from one interview you made to Tamal Krishna in their Bodhaka channel, I think.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
like 3 years ago. So I got to know about you from that interview, I think, and I was like, oh, okay, interesting personality I'd like to meet. And eventually we have some online exchanges and philosophical questions here and there. And then we met, of course, personal in the Harmony Collective
Yeah.
2 years ago. We shared some songs we both composed. And of course, especially a recent retreat we did in Michigan on reclaiming our ideals. That's what comes to my mind. But I don't know if you have any details to fill in that connection.
I think that's accurate. I think if I didn't know that you saw that interview that we had with my friend Kaylee and Tamal.
Kelly and Tamal.
Yeah, which was very powerful. It was, we had attempted. I want to commend you also for a podcast lasting longer than I think they say 10% of podcasts don't get past 10 episodes. And
Oh,
so
really? I didn't know that.
Okay. Oh, no, excuse me. 90% of podcasts
Yeah.
don't get past 10 episodes.
Wow, I
And
didn't know that.
yeah, so it's an amazing, it's very exciting. I think, so anyway, we had attempted that podcast, but I think I found out about you through Namras, hearing about you from there, and then realizing that we had a lot of these connections, networking that just kind of came together. And then it only built a tremendous anticipation for when you first came to the Harmony Collective, and we got to actually have some exchanges. So
yeah. And recent retreat we did there was powerful, in my opinion, very deep, very beautiful, and of course, certain dynamics of circle sharing we had there.
Yeah.
Both you and I were some of the, so to say, invited ones to share their storyline. So also that gives a chance of witnessing and getting to know the other person, although it was not like a personal conversation per se between you and me, witnessing the unfolding of your timeline and you witnessing mine, and as well as others, is, yeah, it really expanded the picture of appreciation of who this person is, where she is coming from. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So Ananda, why you accepted to join this podcast today? Why you
Mm.
decided to invest your valuable time in human form of life to talk with me today? I always like to ask also the guests to just to know from which place they are coming, and not
Yeah.
necessarily which expectations you have, so I fulfill them, but just to witness, to glimpse at the backdrop of your arrival today here.
Yeah. I was waiting for you to ask me that because I've appreciated that question on other podcasts and with other
Mm,
guests that you've had. And when you mentioned it to me in Michigan, I was very excited at the prospect and
mm,
have been reflecting since on, yeah, why have I decided to jump on this call? Um, One hand, obviously, it's because I consider it a great honor to spend time with you and to speak with you. And I think, we've had time in groups, in circle, in ceremony together where we've been able to be in each other's presence. But I'm excited to actually have a longer batch of a conversation on
mm,
one hand.
mm,
Also, I think I'm very motivated by the fact that when I look at our spiritual community, when I look at the anchors in which I find the boat of my faith feeling strongly secure in all the ups and downs of life and the different chapters that I find myself moving through. I consider you, Marj, one of my anchors, just in your presence, and I feel very grateful and excited in the prospect that this community, the growth and the development of this faith community uh, has a guardian as such as yourself. And I think the importance of the conversations that you're having
mm,
and the way in which that has just started to create this really strong mycelium between others that I love very deeply. For me, it gives me a lot of excitement. So those are some of the reasons why I've agreed to have this
okay,
conversation.
thank you. You have justified your presence here today, but that you
Oh,
passed the test. Pass the test, no problem.
great.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. It's humbling and it's inspiring, and I'm equally inspiring to witness the unfolding of the mycelium, as you mentioned, and the interconnectivity of different souls. And I appreciate your expression, faith community, which is
Mm,
for me another way of saying like-minded association. Like we get together with the, not only because we share our the same religion, but we also share a flavor of faith, so to say, right? A way of culturing faith and culturing bhakti. So that naturally, birds of the same feather grow together, as they say.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm happy to be on that same journey.
Yeah. And you just reminded me because I'm thinking of Bhaktivinoda Thakur today, and
Mhm.
specifically you are this term faith community. I just remember the first time I ever heard what's this bhajan? Shodavan He, Shodavan He.
Mhm.
Forget what is the bhajan that song's in?
Is this the song about that if you want to enter into the marketplace, the only price
Oh
is
yeah, yeah.
faith? But I can't. It's not coming now. The word, it's coming. The name in Spanish is El Comisionista, but
Ha ha.
the word in English is not coming from the, like, the commission agent or something. That
Yeah.
sometimes that's the title, but generally they put the first line for the title
Yeah,
of the
I
bhajan.
can't even think of the
Like
first line right
Nityananda,
now.
Nityananda opened the marketplace
Yeah,
in
Doya Nitai Chaitanya
no,
Bole
no, that's
Nache.
another one. That's
Different
another
one.
one.
Anyway, the point being, I remember I
Yeah.
was this was when I'd first became like I was attempting to become a monk. I was traveling with a few other monks around North America, and we
Mhm.
stopped in Chicago, and they happened to be having a very large celebration of the Holy Name.
Mm.
And Badahari Prabhu was there, and he
Mhm.
sang this song, and I saw the
Mm.
translation, and it was like, "Oh, people of
Mhm.
faith." And
Mm. Mm.
anyway, just your reflection of my saying faith community reminded me of that appreciation that it's not about my religious identification or my group, your group, but like, oh, people of faith.
Mm. Mm.
I want a community of people of faith.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. It was Nadia Godrum and Nityananda Maharaj.
yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
and I missed the quotation because I went to another song when I say the commission agent. So I'm mixing all up. Sorry for that. Anyhow, thank you for the contribution. Sorry to interrupt. That it just
No,
came.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree, and I also relate to for me that people of faith or community of faith of like-minded birds, so to say, for me
mm,
even transcends uh, the Gaudiya Vaishnav community. You know, I mean, at least in my opinion, also there is a place for even if we belong to different mystical tradition, we can share so many such close flavor of faith of ways of culturing faith and thinking about faith and life and spirituality and relationship and really and recently I've been doing I don't know some podcasts with some friends which are rabbis, Jewish rabbis, and
mm.
I was we were amazed. Like again, we were kind of doubting. Again, I'm a Jewish. I'm in
Yeah,
Hindu.
yeah,
What's going on?
yeah,
No, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful to reach those places. And remember talking with one of these rabbis recently. I expressed some surprise at the commonalities of what we were talking after an hour, and I like how he was very calm, like not surprised by that, in the
yeah,
sense of, yeah, of course, because we are worshiping the same one supreme entity,
yeah,
and it's no wonder that we will find so much in common. And I really appreciate it from which place of calmness he said
yeah,
that, and he appreciated my surprise as well, of course.
yeah. That you're reminding me. I have a dear friend. He's also a rabbi
Mm,
from we. I knew him in Colorado. I think he and his wife live in Germany now, along with their daughter. While I lived in Colorado, we were very close.
mhm,
I would actually like to connect the two of you, but Joe Charn is he, Rabbi Joe, and same experience, and that's I think testament to faith community, being
mm,
able to be inspired and enlivened. And that another quote by Bhaktivinoda Thakur where he says, "When I walk into another place of worship,
yeah,
the wonder, the chamatkar of how wonderful is my Lord that He is appearing in this way, in this unique, dynamic way, moving, changing lives." So I'd like to actually connect you with Joe Charnas also, if you'd be
please.
open to it, because we would have a lot of these conversations, and they would come to the temple. I would go celebrate Shabbat with them and their family, and it
Mm,
was a lot of this interfeeding
mhm, mhm.
of faith, which
Yeah,
was also very beautiful.
yeah, yeah. And like Bhaktivinoda Thakur saying that quote you mentioned that I shared in Radical Personalism, he says this
Mm,
idea that if you go to a mosque or a church or whatever, you have to think, okay, they are worshiping my own Lord in this unique way. By my own upbringing, I may not be able to understand all the details, but at the same time, I'm getting more appreciation by witnessing their love. Somehow that nourishes my own connection with my Istadev,
mm,
let's say, you know.
yeah,
So I'm indebted to them not only from the lessons I'm receiving, but that sends me back, quote unquote, to my own tradition with renewed focus and perspective and broadness and so on. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah, faith communities, Kijai.
Mm, yeah.
So as I've mentioned in my bio that came in the introduction, Ananda-murari here wears a few hats. He's a musician. He works in a in social dynamics. He supports the Harmony Collective, and he has recently added a new golden hat to his list, which is he's a brand new daddy. So first of all, congratulations for that.
Thank you,
I don't
thank you
have
very much.
an applause button here, an
Yeah.
ovation button, but imagine that internally, very a deep
Okay.
one, not a fake one, but a deep one.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, congratulations for that. And of course, we were talking about the possibility of sharing some words about your fresh fatherhood and
Mm,
also some other related themes like male spirituality or things that
Mm,
connect with the idea of fatherhood. And we have been reading recently some also material in common without knowing, but we have been
mm,
going through some material male spirituality, and of
mm.
course open to whatever topic wants to come on our way. But I don't know. To begin with, I like to kickstart in this connection, asking you, how do you think fatherhood has changed you on a fundamental level so far?
Yeah.
Which is what, not even a month yet, a
Now
few weeks.
it's approaching a month. This Monday will be a month.
Okay.
Um,
Hmm.
Brand new. Yeah, and I appreciate that you put the clause at the end of that so far, because it definitely feels ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
been, yeah, it's been something beautiful and something that I've been anticipating and hoping for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I know, so my
Yeah.
wife and I have been married about almost 6 years, and it was a conversation when we first got together, that it was something that we were both wanting. It was an awareness that I had even from the beginning of my Grihasta journey,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and just the sacrament and the initiation of bringing life into this world. So even on the topic of male initiation, fatherhood is a huge. I'm
Mm-hmm.
experiencing a huge form of initiation, and yeah, my meditation has been a lot around. It was actually something that I had heard you speak about. I think maybe you were in Sweden or something, and I was on a bike ride, and oftentimes when I'm on a bike ride, I'll listen to lecture or class,
Mm-hmm.
and it was something that you mentioned about the nature of God's unconditional love,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's like that of a parent. Like
Mm-hmm.
a parent has unconditional love for this brand new child, and now and probably for another 4 weeks, my daughter's going to be more or less helpless. Actually, probably another few years,
Yeah.
more or less helpless. And especially in the first few weeks, there's hardly even an awareness of reciprocation. She
Mm-hmm.
hardly understands herself being separate from her mother.
Mm-hmm.
She's just, and the desires are very immediate and in your face, very simple
Yeah.
also. But nevertheless, even though there's really no reciprocation from her part, just
Mm.
her being, just her existence evokes in me an affection that is just, it's like a whole new compartment of affection
Mm-hmm.
that I haven't really accessed. I've like tapped on it by like being an uncle, like having
Mm-hmm.
friends with kids,
Yeah.
but there's a
That's
whole
you're
other.
you're tasting whole new rasa now.
Yeah. And so just thinking about this has been a thought, a
Mm.
meditation that I've
Mm.
been having, that God's love is like that. And I know for myself right now, in my own inner development in
Mm-hmm.
world of spiritual life, there's a great comfort and a great discovery of Krishna's unconditional love in this
Mm.
moment. I
Mm.
used to have I still do. It's a reflection that I had. I heard one time that Krishna can understand the desire of the living entity as one can understand the fragrance of a flower.
Mm-hmm.
I always appreciated that image.
Mm.
And I thought at a time back, I was like, oh, that, what must material desire then smell like?
Mm-hmm.
And the thought is like, oh, it's probably very displeasing.
Mm.
And in this new reflection and there's a place for that also, and that's there. But in
Mm-hmm.
this reflection of unconditional love, like even the weird fragrances that come from my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
like she she poos or whatever, she's whatever kind of fragrant, like it's intoxicating. There's just such a joy
Yeah.
in it. So it gave me another perspective also, that Krishna understands that I'm a child, and part of it's just like accepting for me right now that I'm quite still an infant. I've
Mm-hmm.
been over a decade now, Prabhu. Like I'm a senior devotee.
Senior. Yeah.
Yeah. But actually I'm still quite an infant, if I'm being honest, and appreciating that right now.
Mm.
So
Thank you. Beautiful. You have to write some poetry on the intoxicating fragrance of food through the lenses of Vatsalya Bhav. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
there it is.
I'm not joking. I'm not joking.
I know.
Like, because that's kind of the zenith of finding the extraordinary in the ordinary, so to say, right? Which is a
Yeah.
big lesson we receive in every tradition, no? Like try to discover the extraordinary in what seems ordinary, and what can be more ordinary than stool, so to say, right?
Yeah.
And how to find something that intoxicates you, and it's an udipana, a triggering for depth and affection. So again, it shows that's an example. Like you can even address who in a very profound way. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting point to make. Yeah, and thank you for bringing up that connection with Krishna's unconditional love, because I'm happy to hear you. I mean, and part of my intention of talking about this topic for me is like, let's talk about fatherhood and motherhood. Of course, Srirada is not here, your wife, but
Yeah.
she's part of the conversation somehow, about
Yeah.
parenthood in a way that is like glorious, and it's like redeeming, and it's an udipana. Again, it's like a stimulant to become more Krishna conscious, basically, like more
Yeah.
conscious of how Krishna is looking at us, instead of, again, entering those initiations, as you mentioned, which are
Mm.
sacred moments, sacred portals.
Mm.
Instead of entering them as, okay, I'm downgrading myself more and more, right? Like sometimes,
Yeah.
unfortunately, some people may think, some devotees, okay, I was a monk, now I became grihasta, one step down. Now I'm
Yeah.
having children, another step down. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of discovering Krishna more and more, which is, of course, the whole idea. No? I remember, I
Yeah.
think I mentioned in a podcast, but I will mention it without necessary need of mentioning names. But I was horrified when I was told this. Some devotees told me that when they used to get married, that was like 30, 40 years ago, part of the marriage gifts, the marriage party, so to say, in the sacred ceremony, quote unquote, they will give them a lantern, a flashlight, and a rope. And it's like, for what? Because you
Yeah.
have fallen into the dark well now.
Yeah. The deep
So,
dark well.
yeah. And for me, that was like horrible. I mean, so sad, so
Yeah.
tragic. So even if it's a joke, even if I make it you like that's not funny. No? That
Yeah. Yeah.
somehow you are believing that. If not, you wouldn't even think of it as a joke.
Yeah. Yeah. The irony of that either
Mm,
joke, perception, the irony
mhm,
of that is that it's actually created that. It's not that that as it's not that the Grihasta ashram or parenthood is by default a dark, deep hole.
mhm,
But the irony is that my understanding and my observation is that that kind of conception has
mhm.
created
Yeah,
that type of dark, deep hole.
yeah.
Whereas again, it's like, what is Prahlad Maharaj saying when he's saying the Andakupam?
Mhm,
It means
mhm,
that you enter into a situation and you forget about Krishna.
mhm.
So what does this dark deep well consciousness
Forgetful.
create?
Yeah,
It just
yeah.
creates forgetfulness. It's just you're thinking, "Oh, I'm fallen. It's all over. My spiritual
Mhm.
life is, Krishna's not here." That's essentially what you're thinking. That in
Yeah,
and of itself is the
yeah,
deep dark
yeah.
well.
Well, he's omnipresent, but he's not
Yeah.
here. Somehow he managed to be
Yes.
absent here.
Exactly.
He's canceling his omnipresent in relation to the Grihastha ashram, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And how
Yeah.
unfortunate that you have, because I know individuals that have grown up in the movement and or
Mm-hmm.
even um like earlier generations, that this was very much the mood. It was very like it was either like a
Standardized.
weird, yeah, like weird sterilized kind of like, where there wasn't a lot of affection actually, when actually the opportunity of like biologically there's just so much natural, like endorphins, like oxytocin, like all these like biological things are also occurring. There's
Mm,
just such a force of affection and
mm,
momentum.
mm,
And if
mm,
that can just be connected to, this is how God's unconditional love is for
mhm,
me, for my daughter, for like
mhm.
everyone involved, and that Krishna is still fully present in that. Like
Yeah.
what an imprint
Yeah.
that is missed if I
Mhm.
don't see it as the
Absolutely.
actual opportunity.
Absolutely. And again, the dark well is not so much one situation externally speaking or another. Dark well is not being aware of so not being open to those imprints, right? Not being
Yeah.
open to those some scars, not being aware of God's presence everywhere. So dark world can happen in married life, dark world can happen in monastic life, dark world
Yeah.
can happen anywhere, which because
Yeah.
the dark world in itself is an awareness of reality. Let's put it in brief words. So
Yeah.
darkness, basically,
Yeah.
distraction. So yeah, I wanted to make that. Hopefully, as you are talking about imprints, hopefully what we are talking now also creates its own imprints in us and in the community. Like, hey guys, I mean, getting married is also an ashram. Now, ashram
Yeah.
means shelter. So if you properly connect with that dynamics of life, wife, husband, children, education, sacrifice, intimacy, emotional commitment, so many things.
Yeah.
Again, Krishna not only remains there, but he becomes more and more present. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the idea. If you
Yeah.
have that nature, you embrace an ashram that will invoke God's presence even more. And if you don't have that nature, embrace another situation in life that will facilitate God's presence more. That's the principle in whatever life situation we are in. Yeah.
Yeah. I I recall recognizing that dynamic quite early on in my Krishna consciousness and in my
Mhm.
sojourn of trying to uh yeah m- invite more and more of this presence of the Lord in my life.
Mhm.
And I remember just seeing that there's this dynamic. There's a, obviously the initial fervor of I'm a brahmachari. It's like there's an excitement. There's a
Yeah.
sense of uh,
Oxytocin is there as well
yeah,
in the body.
oxytocin's also there. This like level of surrender. And then what I tended to see is that I would see other brahmacharis kind of create this affront to the rest of the world, to their family.
Mm.
Became like this weird thing of like, oh, my family, it's like whatever. And like I think I had a blessed privilege of I have a family that is still together, parents that still love each other very
Beautiful.
deeply and that are still together. And so I think having that perspective, like understanding like, families are always there's always going to be like weird nuances with family, and that's like
Yeah.
part of the collage and that's part of the
Yeah.
beauty.
Even Golok Vrindavan.
Even in Globe Vrindavan, yeah, there's so that dynamic's there, but I never resonated with like, oh, they're just complete illusion. It's just like
Mm.
because I felt that well, I was brought up in a household with a lot of love, and
Mhm.
so I saw that trauma manifesting itself even in the devotee community, kind of masking itself as a form of renunciation. And
Mhm.
then what I saw happen in spite of that, because I was also very fortunate in the community I was brought up in Denver, there were
Mm.
grihastas in that community that we were very close, like we were like their sons. And
Mm.
so they would invite us over, we'd read,
Tusta
Krishna
Krishna
book.
was part of that, right?
Yeah, Tushta Krishna Prabhu. There's this wonderful devotee, Jai Garanga, and his wife Tulsi Saki, Tushta Krishna and Vrinda Sundari,
Uh-huh.
uh, Jai Krishna and uh, Mother. Oh my gosh. Anyway, my mind is blanking at this
Yeah.
moment. But the idea is that we were held by these grihasta couples in this community. They would invite us over. We'd have hot milk, read Krishna book. We it was like we felt the love and connection. What I saw in
Mm.
other communities happening is that you would have these brahmacharis that kind of enclave themselves, if that's the
Mhm.
word, and
Mhm.
when they like couldn't bear it any longer, and they
Mm.
had to like they just cracked, and they kind of they slumped into Mangalarti one day with bleached cloth, and it was like, oh, what happened to you, Prabhu? And like it's just kind of this unceremonious
Mm.
out the back door
Mhm.
kind of experience. And
Mm.
I remember feeling viscerally like that's not what spiritual community is about.
Mhm.
It's not some failure or demotion, but
Yeah.
like having a continuation, the
Yeah.
continued growth.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. And you brought a very interesting point. Of course, with all this and how some of this sometimes repressed dysfunctional uh, levels of renunciation or expression of monasticism already, those are talking about some form of toxic male spirituality, and we may be talking about that in a few minutes. But I
Yeah.
like to touch for a minute on what you are mentioning about, for example, some of these brahmacharis monks that suddenly that were all about rejection and all of, not all, but considerably condemning human connection, if you will, family ties, and certain emotional experiences that are, in my opinion, healthy and totally grounding and balancing and nourishing. And
Yeah.
suddenly they by force of circumstances, as you say, could no longer sustain themselves in their vows. No wonder, with all respect. uh,
Yeah.
and they unceremoniously, by force of circumstance, without proper acknowledgement and proper transitioning, ended up
Mhm.
in the grihastha ashram, probably not with the best opinion of that ashram either. So I'm thinking about, because you yourself lived some years before entering the grihastha ashram as a brahmachari, and if I'm not mistaken, and maybe you correct me, but I don't know if it was your case or a case of someone else that you witnessed, about how the transition from one ashram to the other was done in a more celebratory way, and it was like
Mhm.
publicly acknowledged, and there was some, maybe a ritual or some form of collective meeting to, like, to support and give affection and accompany the person, like to, like a rite of passage, basically, right? Like to
Yeah.
create a particular samskar in the imprint in everyone present. Okay, from this to this is also glorious. No, it was not
Yeah.
that this was glorious, this is not glorious. This is glorious, this is also glorious, and the transition in between is also glorious. No,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so I don't know if you have, if I'm mistaken or not, but if I'm mistaken, then share your thoughts about.
No, yeah, that's correct. And
Okay.
what had happened was I had seen, actually, there was a devotee here in Michigan at the Harmony Collective that I had known as a brahmachari, and he was one of the first brahmacharis that I met that I really saw play mridanga. And I remember he was the first time I ever seen someone do like a doogie, like on the mridanga.
Oxytocin goes to the
Yeah, yeah.
side on that moment.
Exactly. I heard that and I was like, what in the world is that? So he was someone that I had a lot of
I
appreciation
want to
for.
be a brahmachari only because to get to know how to do that.
The doogie. Yeah, exactly. um, and so I'd seen him on social media, actually, that they
Mm,
had a ceremony, a
mm.
snan yagya,
Okay,
and he literally bathed in the Huron out here. They had a feast, they had kirtan, and I was like, that is it, because otherwise I hadn't seen that.
okay.
I had just seen boys transition. So then from that planted a seed of like, this is I want to go out like that. It
Mhm.
was like it became a hallmark of like, okay,
Yeah,
that's I
yeah,
want to do that.
yeah. And that's not going out, but going in further, right?
Going deeper,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So I spoke with Tusha Krishna Prabhu. I mentioned like, hey, I recognized 2 years in that I was like, I'm gonna want to, or like 3 years in or so, like I'll want to transition at some point into having a family, and I'm not like a lifelong brahmachari.
Hmm.
I saw that in myself. I saw that, okay, like
Yeah,
I like to express myself in these different
that's great.
ways. And so then, but I said, but what I want, like, I know that I still have some service here
Mm,
in the ashram, because we had there was three of us, our friend Pranahari, whom you know, and I think you also
mhm.
know maybe Nagar Kirtan, but there was three of us that were essentially like building this ashram
Okay.
in Denver.
Mm,
Um, and at that point, there was maybe like 12 of us in the ashram. And I had this sense of responsibility. And I was like,
yeah.
I want to serve more. And I also recognize that there's still like more for me to learn and
Mm,
unpack. So I said, at least another 2 years.
mhm.
And around that time, very organically, my Guru Maharaj was coming into town, and Tush Prabhu mentioned, he's like, hey, Maharaj is coming. We could do that. We could have some sort of ceremony here. I've already spoken to him, and he's very excited about it. And so we did. It was one night he gave an evening class. He actually spoke on Ishopanishad, which I felt like was also very foreshadowing. I don't know. It felt fitting.
Okay.
And he invited me in front, and we had a large group of the community there, some guests, some really exalted Vaishnavas, friends, and they were all just there. And he brought me and sat me down next to him, and then he invited the community to
Mm,
speak blessings, expectations, like guidance. and just
Mm-hmm.
shower me with these like beautiful expectations that
Mm-hmm.
were just like
Yeah.
holding me up. And by the end of it, I was just like felt completely smothered in
Mm-hmm.
love and
Yeah.
was melting. And then my grandma said, okay, now you say something.
Mm.
And so I shared something about my intention and my vision and my hope, and they all blessed me. And then
Mm.
my Gurudev handed me cloth, and it just, it,
Ah. Wow.
part of
Beautiful.
me was, part of me wanted to do it also because I didn't want to see these brothers that I was living with and growing with. I didn't want to, knowing that many of them were also going to want to be in family life. I
Mostly
don't, yeah,
99.9%. So.
exactly. So I didn't want them to think that the only way to go out was to go out. I wanted,
Mhm.
no, I want to go in.
There's no going out. Yeah, you're not becoming an external devotee. Sometimes they use this expression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the market difference of like that next day when I walked in to do my service, I was blessed with many years with service to Shushigonitai there in Denver.
Yeah.
And I walked in to do my service, and there was a matriarch that lives in Denver. Her name is Mother Nidra.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you met Mother Nidra?
I never met her personally, but I've been
Wow.
to her place and the altar she has with Nishrim Hadeh, but
Oh yeah.
we never got to meet in person for whatever reason. But yeah, I heard about
She's, yeah, she's powerful. And her she's like the embodiment of Nishta also, just in terms of her fixedness
her. Hmm.
in her service to Prabhupada and to Radha Govinda. And so I walk in and I already felt lighter. I felt like wearing this white cloth. It's
Mm.
sometimes I'm a little bit critical of like young men putting on saffron. I think
Mm.
sometimes it creates like a weird psychology. It can,
Agree.
especially if there's not like a clear exit.
Yeah.
For me, I really loved it. I
Hmm.
really like loved it. And then the empowerment I felt wearing white cloth, this like fresh start,
Yeah.
this like
Yeah.
cooked to clarity. And I walked in and she said, "Oh, you were wearing Babaji fish." Like it was just like this really sweet like appreciation, and it just felt like I just felt empowered.
Hmm.
I felt
Yeah.
empowered
Yeah.
to live my life
Yeah. Yeah.
as a devotee.
Yeah. That's the only word came to my mind when we were describing the ceremony and all the community and the elders showering up blessing. I was like empowering, empowering,
Yeah,
every word, every intention, every heart is like another layer of shelter and affection and empowerment because you are entering into a new journey, and that journey of course will have its own challenges, and you need empowerment, you need blessings. So I
yeah,
think it's like before every journey we need a particular set of injections of empowerment to be successful in the journey, no, so to say. So
yeah,
yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And I hope whomever is listening to this may feel, I mean, we are not here wanting to establish something as a standard, but like in one way or another, I think it's common sense to honor those particular moments of transition in one way or another that is always empowering, never disempowering. I mean,
yeah.
and even in Mahabharata, this is mentioned, the Snataka Ashram. Snataka,
Yep.
you have heard Snataka Ashram, which is basically the transition from student life in the traditional Varnashram society to married life. So transitions are as important as the landing points, so to say.
Yeah,
No? Sometimes we may think there's no transition, as you say, just with the bleach cloth and whatever, embarrassed and thinking without processing anything. And for the sake of your next destiny, you have to spend some time in transition and processing, because if not, that's not very sustainable, I will say. No, I
yeah.
remember talking with a few, not only a few, a good number of Prabhupada disciples, and especially a few who were working for this Grihastha Vision team in terms of
Mm,
nourishing couples, and they will tell me like, Maharaj, 90 something percent of our marriages failed
yeah,
as Prabhupada disciples. No, so 90, almost 90% means almost 100%.
yeah,
And of course, there are many things we can say about that and many reasons. Of course, they mentioned one of those will be how the sexual energy and sexual activity was stigmatized and even demonized. But also, I will say part of that, even before the sexual encounter and before the official marriage, was the transition from monasticism to
Yeah.
grihasta, because at that time mostly everyone was brahmachari, at least for a few hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you have no transition, yeah, you have no proper acknowledgement of what you receive, you have no proper
Yeah.
prospect of what's there, and you have no proper blessing. So anyhow, yeah, I like to think of transitions as a gathering of blessings, so to say, for the
Yeah.
next chapter of the journey. So I'm happy that you are sharing your testimony, and hopefully that, yeah, inspires other people to really see the value of that, the importance of that, because as we say, most devotees will enter grihastha ashram at one point. So better we do it in a you do it in a glorious way, in an
Yeah.
empowered way. You need empowerment.
Yeah. I often think of transitions as, the idea of sandhya, like being attentive during sandhyas,
Hmm.
because I think the highest potential to lose something is like when you're going from place to place. And I always think of like going to the airport, like on the way to the airport or while you're packing. That's when you misplace something, leave something behind, lose
Yeah,
something. It's also when, if you do it properly, you have time to really think about, okay, what will I need at my next destination? So it's also the opportunity to gather everything. But if you're rushed, if you're pushed, if it's just like a little too
yeah,
unconscious, that's when you lose things
yeah,
running from place to place.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that we can a beautiful example that I can totally connect with, as I fly quite often.
Yeah.
And I try to do it right. So, and yeah, and I really appreciate the point of the Sundays, because those like specific transitioning energetic moments of the day. So in the
Yeah.
same way, the implication is, in any transition there is some special type of energy that if you connect properly with that, again, you will be empowered. So yeah, I think that one of the important things in the community in this connection should be like, okay, let's not make transitions as fast as possible, because if we are trying to do that, probably is because the idea is, I'm embarrassed of what's about to happen, so I'll try to make it as quick as possible so I don't have to be tortured by my embarrassment. So it all begins by that root misconception of, you are downgrading yourself, you enter into the dark deep well. So to
Yeah.
properly establish a culture of transition, of empowerment, let's say,
Yeah.
first we need to make it clear that any of these stages of life are all in themselves glorious, if properly addressed and properly presented. So there's no need to have shame or guilt or embarrassment, or to, again, try to finish the situation as quick as possible. But yeah, take the necessary time to gather the proper gifts of empowerment, so to take the next step. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
You To pitch one of your other or to plug one of your other podcasts, the conversation that you had with Father Richard Rohr. Um, he mentioned a topic that I had forgotten since reading his book, Falling Upwards, but the unaffirmed life.
Mm-hmm.
And often what happens if those transitions aren't dealt with attentively, he was mentioning that, that leads to the unaffirmed life, where you're supposed to be in the second half of life,
Mm.
this kind of
Mm.
stable, clear,
Yeah,
confident
yeah.
ability to then like surrender even more.
Mm.
But you haven't actually affirmed your first half of life.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's still a sense of, I need to be seen and recognized, and
Yeah,
that happens when the transitions aren't attended to, in my experience, even on a small level.
yeah,
Like if I'm inattentive to going from activity to activity, and I get a little worked up, then I get a little grumpy or something,
yeah,
like even in a small micro
yeah,
version of my life,
yeah,
the inattentiveness
yeah,
to transition
yeah,
properly creates discomfort and disease and so
yeah,
many things.
yeah. And doesn't take you to the destiny you are supposed to be. Going back to your example of the airport, if I fail in my transition and I forget my passport, let's say, I'm
Yeah.
not making it. I'm not making it to my destiny. So in the
Yeah,
same
and then
way,
you're just grumpy in the airport, just
oof, I've seen a few of those faces. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
you don't want to be meet those. You don't want to be those. But that's the price of, again, as you mentioned, yeah, neglecting transitioning. So yeah, I think it's important. I mean, probably this is not our main theme for today, but it just came by its own. But
yeah,
the importance of transitioning, as important as the destination place or the previous place we are transitioning to. No, no, it's
yeah,
not that because it is a transition, it's negligible or something like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for that.
And I attribute that transition because my spiritual life nor my, just like the makeup of my life is not on paper perfect,
Hmm.
right? I've had my ups and downs, and I still have my own challenges and developments and things that I'm working on, but I attribute that transition and the empowerment that came from that and the trust that was bestowed,
Mm.
and also it bestowed a level of confidence
Yeah,
that I can now, it's like a child that has a secure attachment. They're able, they have freedom to explore. They
yeah,
have freedom to discover.
yeah,
So I feel free. I feel confident
yeah, yeah,
to discover and make mistakes and
yeah,
explore
yeah,
because I still feel in. I don't feel out of anything.
yeah. And that's of course it takes me to the idea of male masculinity, in the sense that we, as born males, we need elders and other males to not only validate us and reflect back, but also even admire and respect us in a healthy way, not in a
Yeah.
hey, respect me, but
Yeah. Yeah.
you need that feedback, because if not, you don't have any self validation, and that basically paralyzes you. So yeah,
Yeah.
transitions are another way of seeing that. No, like you are taking giant leap, and you have all these elders and well wishers and friends like reflecting back, approving, blessing, honoring. So yeah, that fills you with self confidence, and it's super empowering. So yeah, anyhow, such an important topic. And,
This,
and,
yeah.
and one thing that comes to my mind, sorry, Ananda, that
No, you're fine.
also for me it's important, this idea of celebrating like huge major transitions, like some of the ones we are mentioning, also because on a daily basis we are going through small transitions every
Yeah.
day. It's not that
Yeah.
it happens once every 20 years. We're always shifting, changing, moving. But if we do not have certain specific moments to acknowledge that there is something called transition that is beautiful and glorious, we will lose sight of this all of the small day-to-day transitions that also we need to be attentive to. Okay, now I'm here, now I'm here, now I'm here. And
Yeah.
sometimes there may be some huge official one. There will be a ceremony, a ritual, some scar to honor that, but not to lose sight of the day-to-day shifts that are happening. And if we
Yeah.
lose sight of all that, again, we live our life without the sense of journey, so to say, without a sense of changes and transitionings and stages and flourishing and growth. It's all the same thing, basically. I'm just doing it in certain way, and at the end of this life, magic will happen. I will transfer to Golok Vrindavan. I don't know how.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So unnuanced, right?
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing back this point of the consistent presence of transition. And
Mm.
again, I think it's just reinforcing for me the fact that that's when you chant prayers. That's when you have some scars. That's when you have these, like, because uh there's an opening. There's a, it's like the baby's head when they're born. The skull is not completely fused because their head's going to be growing,
Mm-hmm.
right? That space in the head allows then the head to grow. So similarly, like in that space, in that like soft spot,
Mm-hmm.
there's like potentiation, like there's potential to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
to be impacted. And
Yeah.
so it's in those transitory moments of our life when, if I can pay attention, I can like I can gain much more momentum than otherwise I might, in a sense of staticness, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Literally becoming ecstatic. Like,
Yeah.
how do you become ecstatic? You transition. There's like movements through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's so valuable.
Yeah. And I cannot avoid thinking about the book I'm writing at present, which is about how love is ever evolving, how Krishna is ever evolving, how everything is in a state of constant expansion, which another word for that could be transition.
Yeah.
Krishna is transitioning from being who he is to becoming even more of who he is, more beautiful, more enchanting. The devotees are transitioning for being pure devotees to developing even more pure love and develop, because there's no limit to how much that grows. So in
Yeah.
one sense we could say even in eternity there is a constant transition to a furthering and deepening of love and what's there. So I think it's a healthy, how to say, template to incorporate, could become accustomed to live life as a constant transition in a healthy way, of course, right?
Yeah.
But we have to begin somewhere. Yeah, yeah. So somehow that's why also in our tradition and most ancient traditions, you have this again some scars or rites of passage to name and frame certain chapters that need to be highlighted as here's a transition going on,
Yeah.
not, at least to begin somewhere, and then try to follow those breadcrumbs on a daily basis as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ananda, going back to your fatherhood, which is a transition in itself,
Yep.
because
Still.
and I'm sure if we do this podcast in 2 more months, you will be a totally different person, probably,
Yeah.
in terms of
Yeah.
how all the transition and discovering and blossoming of your relationship with your daughter is so beautiful. So I'm wondering, in connection to this as well, like how do you plan, if there is any plan, of course, how do you plan to introduce your child to spiritual beliefs and practices? Have you thought about that in
Mm,
terms of, because I've heard people like, okay, I will try to be neutral, not to impose my own religion of my children,
mm.
or I hope that they become Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, and safe to the
Yeah.
last 7 generations. And they and they put such a pressure on their kids, basically, right? Like we
Yeah.
all our ancestors are depending on you, please. So you do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you
Uh,
have any thoughts. You have thought about that, or it's not the moment yet. Sorry if I'm asking
yeah.
something.
Totally. No, it's definitely an awareness. And funny little anecdote we had. You were here the other year for Navadvip Mandala Manasa Parikrama,
Yeah.
where we had this, and so we had that the other day. And this was Sarlata's like first big outing with all the devotees,
Mm-hmm.
her 3-week anniversary of being alive on the planet, and so she had her first little outing. And so I was like, oh, put tilak on her. I went and I tried to like put tilak on her, and she's like moving her face, and it just was like
Shiva,
all over. I'm
Shiva
like,
is still like now.
yeah, I'm like, okay, never mind. We'll wait for tilak. But it was just a funny anecdote because thinking about, I think I have some like old ideas that
Mm.
are like I'm not necessarily like committed to. It's just kind of like, oh, that's what to do and that's what to
Mm-hmm.
expect.
Yeah.
But I think more in the forefront is primarily showing her again, like I was saying at the beginning, showing her that affection
Yeah.
that she can expect, in even greater amounts from Krishna.
Mm.
Like, how can I be the presence of God's love in her life right now
Yeah.
so that she feels enough freedom to explore that on her own?
Yeah.
And that includes like the lack of expectation. Like one thing I was thinking about too is not to detract too much, but for her, her desires, it's like, we're getting into a new sleep cycle. She'll go to bed around 10,
Mm-hmm.
wake up at 2, is up for an hour and a half or so. Daddy's helping, with gases and getting her back to sleep. But, her desires are very straightforward and clear. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm like wet or uncomfortable, I want to be held. It's like they're not nuanced, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, whereas I like try and put all this nuance on my desire. I'm like, okay,
Mm.
Krishna, I want to like make a good amount of money and I want to look good and like I want to do all these and like, but in all these different ways, like I put a lot of nuance on my desire, but
Okay.
the beauty, the beauty in her very straight cut desires, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reality then of my own like desires, they're also just very straightforward and simple. I overcomplicate them in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
but Christian's just like, okay, you're hungry. Okay, you're like, you want to be held. Like, okay, they're very simple also. Um, so that's one thing, is being that presence of affection, acceptance, love that she can expect to then explore and discover in her own relationship with God. And then I think, it's just very natural. Like, I was holding my daughter yesterday. It was like sun was setting and I'm like, let's go do Tulsi Arti. And we just like walked around Tulsi and we just sang Tulsi outside as the sun setting. And the aesthetics of bhakti are village based.
Mm-hmm.
Village based means it's real life. It's just like life is happening. So
Mm-hmm.
all the different ways life is happening, it's village based. And so my reflection, my intention is like, I'm not gonna like hand my daughter a japa bag, and like chant these beads and like, I never want the expectation or the impression to be that to do my religious activities, that's how you'll gain my love.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to be very careful of not just like celebrating when she says Krishna or, things like that, to give although that's sweet and wonderful and glorious,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to just like celebrate those things to give the impression that your love is you achieve my love only by doing my religious
Yeah, yeah,
practice.
yeah. Now you're earning daddy.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's been my meditation, is just like
Mm.
I'm
Yeah.
just gonna
Wow.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
bring her along to the things that I love to do and around the
Mm.
people that I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. Yeah, I was especially thinking, struck by the point that sounds simple, but it's so interesting that how a father and mother ideally should represent for their child Krishna's unconditional love. So how their love to the child has to be as much as possible resembling the nature of what's actually unconditional love, as you mentioned, with some
yeah,
examples, not to give them this idea of if you do this, that is happy. If you do this, you are rewarded. If you do this, I love you. So they start to receive this idea, okay, love is to be earned, is to be
yeah,
deserved. I have to perform to be liked.
yeah,
And of course, their first impression of love is from their parents, and probably then after that they project that same template to God. No,
yeah, 100%.
so that's how it happens. Many times we may say, however you see God, you will see everything else. But also you can see, however you were seen by your parents, you end up seeing God eventually.
Yeah,
No? So if you were not seen by them through unconditional love, probably you will see Krishna as a dictator, or as have an angry, potentially angry daddy, or someone that you have to please and entertain and perform. So finally he likes you. And it's so subtle, but it's so ingrained in what we may be receiving at home. So yeah, in that connection, I like to touch on a little bit more in depth upon the topic of male spirituality, since it's so connected, like
yeah,
whatever you receive at home. And of course, just to clarify, when I'm talking about male spirituality, I like to clarify that both men and women have maleness and femaleness in them. And ideally, what we are always desiring for both men and women is an integration of these different dimensions. Interestingly, in some ancient cultures, the shaman, or the leader, the elder, was sometimes conceived as a man woman, as someone who,
mhm,
even shaman may sound like she man or something, but some
yeah, yeah,
like a person representing divine wholeness, no?
yeah,
Like the sacred as a whole. And for us, of course, divine wholeness will be, so to say, Radha and Krishna. You have the female absolute, the male absolute. There are two, but there are one. The yin
yeah,
yang, again, the poles, the complementarity. Um, and I personally don't believe, at least, that women have to become, to reverse the roles and become like men, and men have to become like women, because it's just another side of the same coin. I will say that. And still both, how to say, both remain losers. Now, unfortunately, maybe in our human history, most societies have been patriarchal, and male toxic masculinity has become chauvinistic and abusive, and that
yeah,
makes the males losers by
yeah,
being like that. And of course, women have been oppressed and abused, and that make them losers also. But it's a
yeah,
system that everyone ends up being a loser, and we want a win-win scenario.
yeah,
So personally, when I think of male spirituality, of course, I also feel it's important to redeem and reclaim femininity, even our female side as males, the feminine in general, in culture, in religion. But also, I think we need to reclaim the masculine, since many times we have a toxic, distorted idea what it means to be a male, because most male have not learned properly what masculinity is. And for
yeah,
me, this comes back again to fatherhood, uh, because as we were talking, healthy masculinity requires a role model to exemplify it. uh,
yeah,
and, and many times boys did not have fathers. I mean, they may
yeah,
not have fathers because they were absent working all day, or because they were present physically but absent emotionally, incapable of proper emotional expression and reciprocation and validation and nourishing. Or
Yeah.
sometimes fathers were physically too present in the form of beating them and abusing them physically. And anyhow, the other day I was reading some research about. I mean, it may sound like common sense, but it's a research also that most men in jail never had a father, basically.
Yeah.
So they have what sometimes is called a father wound. No, there's
Yeah.
an open wound that is not healed, and that makes them, of course, to not learn how to be a proper male themselves. And the other day I was reading one book by Richard Rohr, similar to the ones you have been reading on male spirituality, and he will say, like, healing this father wound may be the most radical social reform we may see, we may need. It can really be so transformative. So
Yeah.
anyhow, some thoughts if you have in that connection.
Yeah. It's reminding me of, we had discussed this book, Adam's Return,
Mm,
by Father Richard Rohr. And
mm,
this is I'm just in the very beginnings of it, but
mhm,
it's all about the 5 promises of male initiation. And this quote that he says, basically, that we've developed this society of, being over mothered and under fathered. And again, like, to just kind of clarify, it doesn't mean that mothering is not important, but again, we want to be able to have a balance of the
mhm.
scale. And
Yeah,
what often happens is, because the men are not showing up, then the mothers have to, like, overcompensate for the
Elaine.
lack of balance, right? So then you have this idea: over mothered, under fathered, or just a society without fathers.
Mhm,
And I I ascribe, because I feel like this is, what I've both observed and just in my own processing and thinking about the topic. Our dear friend Dave Amadava, our mutual friend Dave Amadava, like, we have this framework that I find very uh, powerful when it comes to thinking of the male female dynamic. And one of the tenets is that, really, like, any issue that we see in the world, and this is something that you hear in Gita as well, that, Arjuna's doubting, and he's like, if this war happens, so many of these men will die. And when so many of these men will die, the woman will be unprotected, and it'll cascade into a
mhm,
whole series of unfortunate outcomes.
mhm,
And so, like, any problem in the world is really, like, you can trace it back to men,
mm,
right? And there's 2 ways to take that, at least in this dichotomy, right, that I'm creating. One way is that, okay, men are horrible, toxic masculinity, bad, do away with men, or, like, guilt men for the patriarchy and whatever else, right? Or the recognition that men need to be empowered
mhm,
to be able to create a nice, the proper environment. So there's this quote. Richard Rohr says, the effects of this are lifelong. Basically, this, like, society without fathers. The
mm,
effects of this are lifelong for both genders, creating boys who never grow up and want to marry mothers instead of wives,
mhm,
and girls who won't, and girls who want securing and affirming daddies instead of risk-taking partners.
mhm. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So this dynamic of and the lack of male initiation, the lack of uh, examples of, my forefathers becoming initiated and holding that space, that creates uh,
Ananda-murari, could you share a few words about what's male initiation? Because some persons
huh,
listening may not have an idea, may interpret initiation like only Vaishnav Diksha or something. So,
yeah, yeah.
a few words of what that means in the context of what you are explaining. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I would say, and from my understanding currently, and like I said, I'm just entering into this book,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just kind of piecing together my current understanding. Male initiation for me is really the passing of a torch. It's the acceptance of a new responsibility. It's exactly what I mentioned, of, like, going from, it's transition,
Mm-hmm,
and it's transition through an awareness of new boundaries and new opportunities.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, they have, Richard Rohr gives another example of, there was an area in Africa, in this jungle, that these, all of these little teenage elephants were just becoming absolute menaces, and
Mm-hmm.
they were killing little baby elephants and breaking trees and causing a whole bunch of havoc. And they discovered that actually there are no bull elephants, like big
Mm-hmm.
father bull elephants. So what they did, they took like 4 or 5 bull elephants, helicoptered them into this area,
Okay.
dropped them in, and within a week and a half, it just took a few, like
Mm-hmm.
threatening little, from the
Boundaries.
bulls,
Yeah.
the boundaries. Exactly. The teenagers got it together,
Yeah.
and they started behaving like
Yeah.
well work,
And they need
supporting.
that. It's not that they're against that, although it may sound they're anarchic, rebel, but actually
Yeah.
they are crying for that by through that
Yeah.
behavior, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would say male initiation is that it's like, it's not, it doesn't have to be hazing or anything like physical. It doesn't mean that only.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to also like just throw that out, because there is something about the male bravado of like that can be useful for some men.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more importantly, it's like the acceptance of responsibility and the acceptance of like risk taking,
Yeah.
like that opportunity.
Yeah.
So I would say that.
Yeah.
And
Beautiful. Yeah. And yeah, recently also was reading some research that they were mentioning that many women end up divorcing their partners because the men do not have enough initiative. No,
Mhm.
and they are waiting for that. And again, that's related to this idea of risk taking and initiative, and probably that's not happening because they don't have self confidence.
Yeah.
They didn't receive again the empowerment and the support and the validation and the role model to understand how that can happen. Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, I appreciate your description of male initiation. Of course, different ancient traditions have their own way of performing that through ritual, through a particular ceremony, in one way or another. As you mentioned, a special creation of awareness of a particular transition. I remember being with Richard Rohr a few months ago, and he was describing because he recently moved from being like the so to say director of the Center for Action and Contemplation to retiring from that role and entering more into Abadut stage, so to say. No, like he
Yeah.
just sits, he will tell me, and just starts to glance and contemplate, and that's only quote unquote that. But
Yeah.
they made a whole ritual for his transitioning into that role
Yeah.
as well. No? And he told me that
Yeah.
he will take a stick and he will like mark the land, uh, like marking, okay, I'm going through that, and with the stick he will touch the other side of the land, like testing how is the soil over here safe.
Yeah.
And then he will take the step, and all his followers or his supporters, most of them younger than him, were like blessing him, not only the elders, because at this point he's basically the elder, but all the younger generation are blessing him to become a further elder. And everyone was crying, so it was so moving and so, yeah, so
Mhm.
ideal, no? So yeah, that brought me there, but it's connected to what you are mentioning in terms of an awareness of a particular step we are taking that is done in such a way that is confirming, validating, empowering. And if we do
Mhm.
not do that, as you nicely pointed, many times husbands will just look for another mother, and wives will look for another father, and no wonder that still there are so many divorces. Of course, there may be many reasons for that, but one of
Yeah.
the main one is this as well.
Yeah.
And I will add another layer to that, which is sometimes in our own tradition, and I'm not saying always, and I'm not saying it's necessarily unhealthy, but many times we may look for a guru also for him
Mm.
to try to fill in into
Yeah.
certain roles we didn't receive. And I'm not saying that's entirely wrong. In some way, you can find in a guru a reassuring, validating person. In some ways, the guru can be a father or a mother, not in every single way, but I acknowledge there's place for that. But sometimes it becomes a problem when the over expectation is too much, and especially when the guru agrees to fill in that much, and
Yeah.
the relationship stops being guru disciple and becomes something that shouldn't be, so to say, right?
Yeah. You're reminding me of, you asked me earlier about what my thought process or reflection is upon, you know, that relationship that I have to impart God consciousness, if you will, faith to my daughter.
Mm.
And one of the things that I've been increasingly inspired by is specifically in circles like we had in Michigan, where we were sitting and there was a community, there was testimony taking place, recently trying to honor another type of transition, these Akadashi moments from, the first portion of the month to the middle to the last portion of the month, these transitions via Akadashi, these windows,
Yeah.
um, trying to hold sacred vigil on these powerful nights, in groups, in like men's circles that I've been a part of, where the center has been hearing and chanting, and there's full capacity and space for relating as humans, but also very serious about wanting to hear and wanting to chant. And recalling specifically an event that we had in St. Augustine, Florida, and we had beautiful discussion, beautiful, like just good feasts and fun, and just all around it was wonderful. And we had this kirtan, and I remember thinking in the kirtan being very moved in this kirtan,
Mm-hmm.
and reflecting and seeing like, this is what I want to create in my life, something where I'm actually tasting and experiencing something,
Mm-hmm.
so that my child, my friends' children, that there's not a sense of like, oh God, like I need to do this thing and to
Mm-hmm.
become accepted, but
Mm-hmm.
they're feeling like, oh, like our dads are doing this thing every Akadashi.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait till
Mm-hmm.
I'm old enough to do that. I
Mm-hmm.
can't wait till I can join them. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, again, like this level of initiation, that it's not like I don't need to force anything upon you. And I think this is the best way to like share Krishna consciousness also. It's like, I've never seen it work where I'm like forcing my faith upon you.
Mm-hmm.
I had me and Ujwala, you recently just had a podcast with Ujwala, and we met one of these Christian preachers on the street corner, and we were just having an open discussion, like, what's your, and it gave us a lot of perspective and like even appreciation for where this person's mind was,
Mm-hmm.
but just asking like, does this work? Like, honestly, like, do you see it working where people are, you know, coming to the faith because of this type of preaching work? And we just heard a lot of like, gave perspective of like, okay, this is what many of the early disciples did. This was his understanding. Like they would speak on the street corners in the
Mm.
city markets. And there was, I gained an appreciation, and at the same time recognizing like, better the best way is to experience something myself,
Mm-hmm.
and have that, like, the transference of an actual experience
Yeah.
be the thing that's calling someone
Yeah.
further.
Yeah. There's no other way apart from that.
Yeah.
For actual transmission, as you say, no?
Yeah.
If you are not converted yourself, so to say, of course, it's not that we are trying to convert people. At least that's not
Nope.
my prospect. But if something happens in that way, only can happen as long as I myself I'm converted to whatever I'm telling you. And conversion is something that we have to go through as an undeniable experience. It's not something that
Yeah.
someone like pushes onto us and now I'm converted. No, that you
Yeah.
are not. Externally, you accepted the faith, the religion, the social dynamic, the rules, but the conversion is always internal, right? So, but yeah, I totally agree with trying to transmit those impressions to your child, basically. No, like that is living that. It's having an experience of that. So his experience creates an experience in me, because if you are
Yeah.
close to someone who really is having an experience, that creates an experience. Just being close to someone having an experience is your own experience, right? And you
Yeah.
want
And
you want to pursue further. I mean, like, wow, being next to that in such a state is such an experience for me, but I can see that his experience is actually something else than mine. So
yeah.
I would like to contact that experience, but just being close to that is an experience in itself. So yes, that's how real faith is shared in a natural, organic way.
Yeah. And just to go back to your original question, or we were kind of on this thread of initiation,
Mhm.
developing that space. Like, I'm also thinking of like initiation being one, it's like the the acceptance of a new responsibility, the acceptance of a new mystery, and that being willing to like and being empowered. I think the other part of initiation is like what I'm accepting and then what I'm also being given. Right, I'm being given the empowerment to feel free to explore
Mm.
this new mystery.
Yeah.
Um, but I think also like in the same way, like I need to be receptive. And just like I appreciate this point that you made when we were together last in Michigan, that I was talking about, the excitement of being able to impart and share an experience with my daughter. And also you reminded me gratefully that, yeah, and also she will be imparting to you. Like there is a transmission coming through her. And
Yeah.
I think real initiation is marked by that I'm ready to give at a higher level and I'm ready to receive at
Mm.
a higher level, and
Mm.
how those two things
Yeah.
nourish one another.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of the point I made in Radical Personalism about the guru, that the guru not only is teaching the disciple, but someone to be a guru is someone who has the capacity to learn more. Not
Mm,
only the capacity to teach more, but the more advanced you are, the more you can also learn. Not only the
yeah,
more you can also teach. So, in
yeah,
that sense, you could say, arguably, a guru will be, at least hypothetically, a guru will be learning more from the disciple than the disciple from the guru, probably because of his greatest capacity to learn. Not
yeah,
because the disciple is instructing the guru necessarily, but the guru nonetheless is, as you say, no, it's taking a step, is a step to a greater level of receiving and giving, receiving
yeah,
and giving. No, so yeah, I appreciate you reminded me of that point I made about your baby, because yeah, there are such great teachers, right? I
yeah,
remember once reading one description of, yeah, babies being so fragile, right? I mean, a baby's, to begin before saying fragile, I would say a baby is so attractive. If someone is having a conversation and someone enters with a baby, I mean, no, all the attention, all the conversations goes
yeah,
one unidirectional. I mean, unidirectional, one pointedness in that direction, and so much attraction, like a hub of attractiveness and magnetism. And someone make once the point, that's also because the baby is so vulnerable and fragile, and
yeah,
that has its own beauty when it's
yeah,
expressed in a very unassuming way, in a very natural way. When you learn to be vulnerable and show your fragility without hiding,
yeah,
wow, that attracts. That's beautiful. Not like making a point like, but we grow and we lose that capacity.
yeah,
Being vulnerable and sometimes babies are crying and we don't like to hear their crying, because that reminds us how much we are crying, but we are not courageous enough to show up our crying publicly, and that's something going in, and we don't want sometimes to be reminded of that much. So in so many
yeah,
ways the babies are mirroring and reminding and teaching even without them being aware of. I will
yeah,
instruct daddy today, he give him his
yeah,
lessons. But that's the arrangement of nature, how the cycles, how the relationships work. Yeah.
yeah. And I think a testament also that I, as a funny side note, I remember I become conscious sometimes, like before we had a
Mhm.
child, I'd become conscious that when our friends would come over
Yeah.
with their babies, like I would address the baby first,
Okay.
like, so it's like the parent becomes like the
Yeah.
backstory, but
Yeah.
so
Perfect.
I'm ready. I'm like becoming the backstory now, which is I'm fine with. Um,
That's another good, yeah, important lesson. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But
Yeah.
I think a testament to how attractive babies are is like how present Krishna is, the all attractive
Mm-hmm.
in their being. Like
Mm-hmm.
you call, you speak of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as being the supreme personality of vulnerability, like
Mm.
a vulnerable Godhead,
Mm.
right? And in the same way, like how attractive Krishna
Yeah.
is, and like
Yeah.
the presence of Krishna within a small child.
Yeah. Yeah. The all attractive is the all vulnerable. Yeah. It's not only almighty, but all vulnerable. And in the same way, yeah, beautiful to conceive a baby as a zip file, as a condensed version
Yeah,
of these
was it,
principles of vulnerability being synonymous with beauty, right? Like
yeah,
giving us this message, like beauty has to be vulnerable. If
yeah,
vulnerability is totally hidden, there's no beauty left. So yeah, this beautiful small personality, big personality came here to remind us of that. Ananda, since we are talking about your baby and you're being a father,
Yeah.
going back to your fatherhood, not only you've recently birthed a child, but also you've
Uh,
birthed an album also. So
yeah.
you're a Prajapati of sorts.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
And
have
it felt
different,
like a baby. It felt like
yeah.
a
So I like
I
to,
felt pregnant. I felt like there was
yeah.
labor, like all the whole thing.
That's what I want to go to enter the antelila of of our conversation, because again, as a musician to begin with, I mean, I'm a musician myself. I recorded albums before being with the devotees, during, and I know all that takes to produce your own album. I mean, that's a pregnancy unto itself. It's a huge in itself is a huge creative act. No, so again, you can make so many parallels because between procreation of a baby and creation of an album. It's a child of its own. Uh, so yeah, I don't know if you would like to share some thoughts in that connection, the
Yeah.
intertwining of your life as a musician and a musician being a father in itself, birthing an album recently,
Yeah.
uh, and how that mixes with your recently being a parent of a human child, not a
Yeah.
no, which is a, he has his own soundtrack in itself. It's an album unto himself, so many
Yeah.
sounds. So yeah, any thoughts about that?
Yeah. It's it was and still is, because
Yeah.
it's an ongoing process. I I reflect back to when I first transitioned out of the ashram and into the next ashram. And in that transitionary period, there were a few songs that I had written while I was in the ashram, but
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, I had stopped like my full on creative musical expression while in the ashram. And after I moved out of the ashram, there was a few new ideas that were coming forth, and I had a sense that, okay, I have this small body of work. Some of it was music that I had written back in college that still felt very relevant. Some of it was a song or two that I had written while I was living as a monk. So there's this kind of gestation of six songs that
Mm-hmm.
boiled down to, and those six songs were the ones on my first EP that I released back in 2018.
Yeah.
And that little EP is called Mosaic of Many Years, and it's very much a mosaic of like 12 years prior while living as a college student, and then like years living as a monk, and kind of came all together in this
Mm-hmm.
one birth.
Yeah.
And the moment I recorded that and did that, like I felt a whole new pregnancy of
Mm-hmm.
new music, new ideas, new things to process. And that was in like a 2 year, 2.5 year process, writing, collecting, arranging, trying. And then finally it just came to a point of like, I want to record like a full album.
Mm.
And it's a big endeavor, both financially,
Mm-hmm.
energetically,
Yeah.
temporally, you know.
Yeah.
And
And
so
occupies your mind so much, even if you are doing other things, the songs, the
yeah,
arrangements, the ideas, I mean, you may have to
yeah,
do other things, but the album is there. Yeah.
yeah. And what was very interesting specifically about the recording of that album. So I actually recorded the first two songs, the singles, in this room. My producer Tejas, who's who's just an amazing musician and amazing producer. He came here. We worked for a whole week and just
Mm.
kind of got into a flow with one another. And then we recorded the rest of it in Portland, where I'm actually going to be going again in September to record a few more songs. But
Okay.
while I was there in Portland, we had just Sri Radha Devi, and I had just found out that she had become pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe like 4 weeks prior
Okay.
or 8 weeks prior. So it was still the very beginning, and we had been wanting to be parents for a while now, and so this was the second pregnancy,
Mm-hmm.
because the first pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. So I'm there recording, and there's one song on the album called "Run Out the Sun,"
Mm-hmm.
and it's like my what's the word, operatic, as much of an operatic rock song as you'll get to. It's kind of a little bossa nova. There's horn section. It's a whole variety of things.
Okay, we forgive you for that one. No problem.
And so anyway, it's a song that I very much like. I wrote after my grandmother had passed away, and it's also was inspired by another gentleman that I knew that I used to go and spend time with in a retirement home. His name was George, and so this song kind of represented death. The opening line is, "I just expect you to be there, in spite that everyone is leaving," and it references like Yudhishthir Maharaj's conversation with the crane, and he's like, the most astonishing thing is that living entities are dying all around us, but still I think, oh, I'll live forever. Right, so it references that. So I was actually in the process of recording that song, and I got a call from my wife, and she informed me that she had had a miscarriage with the second pregnancy. And so it was like intense, because I'm like literally all the way across the country, and she's like processing this. She wants to be a mom so bad. And it was this juncture while I'm recording that song that day, those lyrics, that vocal take was that day. And anyway, I think I that whole process of recording that music, releasing that music, sharing that music, obviously we process that being inspired by my wife, processing how she processed the miscarriage, because it was sad for me, but it was like physically challenging and sad and emotional for her, and the way that she was initiated by that event, and the way that like my music, I was able to like kind of process through my music, and in that moment, now it's a piece of work that I'm so excited that it's out there and alive, and I'm just excited that I have these opportunities to write and create music like that. I went on a few different tangents, but I think the process itself was amazing, and I'm excited to be recording some more music later this year.
Beautiful. Can you recall us the name of the album for those who would like to look for that?
Yeah, the album is called Ripen Off the Vine.
Ripen Off the Vine. Okay.
Yeah. So
and your author name is Ananda-murari, right?
Ananda-murari.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I can totally relate. Of course, I'm a sannyasi, so as a sannyasi, I'm not expected to become a father biologically speaking. That's not the idea. That may be a problem. But in my own way, as a musician, not only as a musician, but also especially now as an author and writing books, I've could empathize with all these pregnancy stages. Although it may sound weird to say, I'm pregnant as a sannyasi.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first conception of the idea, and before even writing it, the conception, the inception, the pregnancy, all the labor pain and the birth, and then how you had some ideas of the work of the project, but it takes a life of its own. It has its own twists and turns, and you yourself end up being completely transformed by the process itself. So something was born, but also you died to something, and you were born again because of that particular birth. So to say, like your child was born, and you died to your previous self before your child was born, and you are born again. So again, also it's an important point to conceive reality in these transitions of constant birth and death, birth and death, birth and death. But yeah, I personally can totally relate with this idea. I have already 2 children, on an author level, not biologically. The third one is in process. It has already been conceptualized. Now, pregnancy is starting to happen. There's peer review and editing and all that. But and I like also recently, I was reading, I think also from Father Richard, he was mentioning how the word, making a play of words between author. An author, of course, can be also a musician, of course. And when you author, if you author from a place of authenticity and dignity, somehow you author life on others, and you have authority. No? And he connected the word authority in that way. Like you are authoring through your life in others people's life, and he will conclude that's the only authority that I can think of, a healthy one. No, if that authoring is not taking place, is that birthing is not taking place mutually, authority can be problematic, to say the least.
Yeah, yeah.
Anandaji, just to reach our conclusion, a few words of how, I mean, you are spiritual. You are many things. We talk about your different hats. You are a spiritual practitioner. You are a musician. You are a father. How somehow you integrate all these three as one, basically, as part of who you are, as a bhakta, as a devotee, as a Vaishnava, as a brand new father, as a musician, as an author, as an artist. So
Yeah.
how you find like integration, or you work on the daily integration of those facets of the jewel?
Yeah, I think a part of it is, as you were asking, as you were saying that, as the reflection that was coming up for me is that I'm still very much, I feel in many ways still trying to integrate all those things. And I
Yeah.
think part of my process recently has been exploring, one could say like the experience of monastic life is one form of extreme.
Mm,
It's like you're going into an extreme of spiritual practice day to night. Like it's, so there's like an extreme there. And I think that's been a little bit of my process. Like right now I'm in this realm of exploring, if you will, like the extreme of, okay, becoming very successful in a career, becoming,
mm-hmm,
established as a musician, like
mm,
working on my craft,
mm,
professionally, and like just as a form of personal expression. That kind of the extreme. I'm just, not that I'm making extreme decisions necessarily, but I'm
mhm.
I'm really allowing all of it to settle. And again, like I like this point that came out in this conversation, not rushing it,
Yeah.
not thinking like, oh, I gotta like do it now. I gotta get it done. I don't want to rush any of this.
Mm,
So the transition that my spiritual life feels like it's in, the transition that I'm in practically as a father, the transition of like career wise as I'm moving up and gaining more responsibility, and the transition of like being in a community and being a husband, like all these things, I guess my attempt at integration is time
mm-hmm.
and space and trust,
Yeah.
and doing what I
Mm,
can, appreciating what I can do and what I do,
mm-hmm.
and trying to just pay attention. I guess that's my process right now.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's an ongoing process, right? It's not like, okay, integration is over. Now I can rest for eternity. So I
Yeah,
value your words not only for your particular stage, but it's an ongoing
yeah.
process of integration. So thank you for that. And Ananda, let's conclude with a song. Will you be
Okay,
able to offer us some pearls, some jewelry in the form of melodies and lyrics and poetry?
we'll share a song.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know
it's a
if you
song
want
that
to introduce it. Yeah.
yeah, it's a new song that I'm going to be recording later in September.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've been in conversation, like this is one of the most alive songs for me right now.
Okay.
So I'll grab my guitar and I'll bring it
Please.
back over here.
Yeah. What's the title of the song? Does it have a title already?
It does, yeah. The title of the song is called "Desert in the Middle."
Mm-hmm.
So you have to tell me how the sound
Yeah.
is coming through. Is it okay? You can hear
That,
the guitar?
yeah. Yeah. That's fine.
Okay. So yeah, this song is called "Desert in the Middle."
Okay.
Um, and yeah, I'll let it speak for itself. And then if you have reflections afterwards, would love to dive in.
That may be another podcast, but let's see.
Yeah. Oh, mother, I'm feeling thirsty, but I'm drowning in my memory of words I've broken and truths I couldn't speak. And all the pieces lay before me. Oh, brother, you see my darkness, illuminate my fear. Yet I move forward, no Some say I forgot about the vision, that every step I take takes me further into the field. I say I'm going through transition, cleaning up the past so my future's nice and clear. Don't you take it for granted all the time you get to wait, learn to walk on your 2 feet. Oh, don't leave it empty-handed from the desert in the middle of the heart. Oh, Father, can I return those gifts you gave to me? Although I've used them, still I have not seen all you offer and all you take from me. Oh, sister, won't you carry this heart back through that door? It got so heavy being left out in the storm. Some say I forgot about the vision. Every step I take takes me further into the field. I say I'm going through transition, cleaning up the past so my future's nice and clear. Don't you take it for granted all the time you get to wait, learn to walk on your 2 feet. Oh, don't leave it empty-handed from the desert in the middle of the heart. Don't you take it for granted all the time you get to wait, learn to walk on your 2 feet. Oh, don't leave it empty-handed, the desert in the middle of the heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, I don't have the ovation button here, but
You have to ask Namras. He'll hook you up with those
yeah.
buttons.
Thank you. Thank you, Ananda-murari. It was beautiful, and so beautiful that the word transition came very central there. It was not planned, just for those who are seeing the podcast. I
Yeah.
didn't tell him, sing a song about transition and let's start talking about transition. And I appreciated that, and I appreciated the addressing of mother, father, brother, sister, also like opening the necessity of having those types of connections and the respective gift that come from each one of those. And anyhow, many things we could do a separate podcast on the song. But I want to thank you for the offering of the song, for the offering of the song of your life and your presence today. And I don't know if you have any final words you would like to share with us, any thoughts, conclusive thoughts to bring to put the conversation to rest.
I'm just so grateful for you, Marash, and I'm very grateful to have, again, like I said at the beginning, this tenant of our friendship that's really building the structure of my strong confidence in how Krishna's taking care of me and how I'll continue to be taken care of. So thank you for being a part of that, and just very grateful for our connection and looking forward to more and more of it.
Thanks so much for making me part of that, and very happy to be also in your faith community, in your heart community. And it's my pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for tuning in to the Free Radical podcast. And if you enjoyed our conversation, please support us by subscribing and clicking the bell. And your likes, your shares, and comments help us to continue with these conversations. And as I like to say, if you would like to pay back for whatever we have shared and you have received today, the way to pay back is by paying it forward. Not only by sharing the episode, but especially by you embodying the lessons that touch you today, and in that way extending those gifts to others. So thank you so much again for tuning in, and see you in 2 weeks for our next episode of the Free Radical podcast.